The Damned is on tour. It is just amazing. It's 50 years after they started, and I think they're playing more gigs than they have in decades, just day after day after day. They're going through Europe right now. They were just in Amsterdam. It's just awesome. Oh, I love the Damned. They're so great. All right, everybody, let's get into it. We're going to discuss this, and I want to make sure that we get your feedback on this. You got it. Let me ask you a couple questions here, okay? The unconstitutional CDC, NIH, NIAID, the lies of Fauci, and deeper lies associated with protection by so-called protection statism. Yes, that's right. It's there for your protection. And if you don't like it, you'll see just how well protected you are. So let's head on over to the news notes and check this out. Fauci before the Senate. This is going on live as we work. So we were working on this throughout the day. Fauci not only never answered any questions, instead invoking the Fifth Amendment's protection against self-incrimination 111 times, he broke Senate rules by, for many minutes at the opening of the hearing, keeping his main bad boy attorney beside him for counsel, rather than on a bench behind him with the other 6 attorneys that he brought with him, since he only alone was supposed to be answering questions at the desk. The solo requirement did not preclude him from turning to get advice from his legal team, but clearly Fauci knew that turning to them each time he was asked a question would look terrible on screens. So he kept his main legal meister beside him to whisper in his ear like a worm tongue. Rand Paul had the lawyer thrown out. And so this was, you probably saw it, one of the big buzzes of the day, a major one, to a round of applause from many of those in the audience. So you'll see here, this is the action as it happened, but it was edited by the folks at CNN. So I've got the original footage. I actually recorded it while it was happening this morning. So we're not going to go to the CNN one, which is edited to make, I think, a little different picture appear. I'm not going to say which way, but maybe they're doing it for brevity, but I wanted to show the whole thing. It's over pretty quick. So Fauci's claim of Fifth Amendment protection, as I mentioned in David Knight's chat today, and David brought it up also, could actually be problematic for him. And this is where I want to go with Rand Paul and Jim Jordan as they're working on this. Since Fauci was pardoned via a very ambiguous Biden pardon, he would be indemnified before the committee unless he perjured himself previously before Congress. And clearly he knows that if he says something now, he's not protected should he be found to be lying. By invoking the Fifth Amendment, Fauci could be cited now for obstructing a congressional investigation or Senate investigation within the halls of Congress and the legislative branch, which also carries federal penalties. So I've got some footage, of course, that people got to watch today. Ron Paul and Danny McAdams offer some reminders. And I want to start with this. Before we go into Rand Paul and Fauci invoking the Fifth and the lawyer, I want to just give a quick update, just as a bell ringer, to remind ourselves of maybe some of the things you went through regarding stating the truth about the weave of the masks, stating how the mRNA jabs were not proven to be effective, how they pulled people out of the sample studies and actually injected them, how dangerous these things were going to be because anybody who was familiar with mRNA knew that you could get transfection where it would invade the cell. All these sorts of things. Anybody familiar with even basic microbiology could figure this stuff out, right? Well, I'm going to show you a little bit later a doctor who was watching while I was watching, and I decided I'd go back and record some of the nonsense things that she had to say. It was incredible as she watched Jim Jordan. Literally, Jim Jordan is bringing up the VAERS data that was hidden by the CDC, and she says he's got no argument. It's just astounding. It's astounding. But let's go to Danny McAdams and Ron Paul and give them their due because they were terrific today. And I really appreciate what they had to say. So we're going to go over there. Of course, we're going to get an ad from the folks over at you know where, Rumble. And we'll get rolling. So here's Ron Paul handing it over to, of course, Danny McAdams. Ron Paul, the father of one of the men who really grilled Fauci.
The people have suffered from this one, and it's been bad. It just, within our own organizations, so many people, have suffered from the wildness on the just total disappearance of our civil liberties. So that to me ultimately is the big deal. We are celebrating 250 years where there was a movement, and there were some people, and including myself, thinking maybe the revolution was one of the best, or at least better, revolutions, where we ended up with more freedom and protection of the people. Where the wars we have today, how many wars can we think in my lifetime or in the last century, in this century, that things have been improved? And whether it's liberty, whether it's our financial condition, how many people get killed. So it's the consequence that goes on, and yet we still get embedded with the consequences. Today we'll probably talk about a battle here and a battle there, and they're important, and it's good to know what the people are thinking. But the whole thing is, if you had policies, where you wouldn't expect Fauci-type people telling us what we should do with our vaccines, and many more people dying from the disaster there than the people that would die with this thing that has turned out to be a very, very bad cold. So this is a tragedy. But to me, it's not narrowed down to a little bit of misunderstanding in science. It's a big misunderstanding on who should provide safety and security and peace. And it isn't sending a few people who are hungry for attention and hungry for money, and they're willing to do anything, and end up the richest people in the country like Fauci, that they're going to solve our problems.
So let me ask, do you feel safe and secure when there's a gang of people pointing guns at you to tell you that they will define for you what is safe and secure? And when does that ever end, right?
Obviously, it's very clear, and maybe this is a good point. It's very clear that approach is wrong, and we ought to really start challenging it with more energy.
On X, Dr. Paul, Dr. Simon Godek had a really good, very succinct bill of particulars about Fauci, and I'll just read it out. I'm sure there's plenty that other people can add to it. But he says Fauci lied about masks, vaccine efficacies, asymptomatic transmission, children killing their grandparents, fatality rates, the 6 feet rule, the lab leak, gain of function research, PCR testing, ivermectin, Paxlovid. So yes, he definitely belongs in prison, writes Dr. Godek. We could probably add a lot more to it, but just that bill of particulars, Dr. Paul.
Absolutely right. Now let's get over into the video footage that I've got for you of Rand Paul. And first, I want to show you one of the sycophantic Democrats who was there to talk about how important it was that Anthony Fauci was there and how sick he was of having all these hearings. And there has been so many committees that have investigated this. And yet he's still pushing for more centralized control. He literally is exposing the inefficacy of the federal government system as he's calling for, typically, this is the way it goes, more money to go to the federal government system.
You're not recognized. You're not recognized. If you are unruly, you will be removed from the proceeding. You are not recognized, and you are not recognized, sir.
Oh, I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression. We're going to go to that man in a minute. That's the man who is giving us his Democrat take on how important it is to go to the central government. This is just going to be Rand throwing out the lawyer. So let me show you. Here we go.
You're not recognized. You're not recognized. If you are unruly, you will be removed from the proceeding. You are not recognized, and you are not recognized, sir. Sir, you are not recognized. You are not recognized. Security, we'll hold off, but you will respect these proceedings. You were told not to sit at the table. You insist on sitting at the table, and we told you you would not be recognized. You are not invited here for testimony, sir. You are being disruptive. Would you behave this way in a courtroom? No, because the judge would put you in jail. I can't do that today, but I can have you escorted from the premises. So I would say, sir, sit quietly and don't say another word. I said, sit quietly. You are not recognized. Another word and you're gone.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear what the attorney has to say.
He is not recognized by the committee or the chair. If he speaks again, he will be removed from the room. This testimony is from Anthony Fauci. This is not a game with his lawyers. He can advise. His lawyers can give him advice. He's got a half dozen here. They're all allowed to talk to him.
Yes.
All right? But the attorneys are not recognized. In fact, the attorney was told not to sit at the table, and he's not obeying that recommendation. There's a row behind you, sir. That's where you were told to sit, and you're not. And now you're disrupting the proceedings. And so, look, this is the way Anthony Fauci wants to be remembered, for a lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room.
I just go into your.
Let the record state that Dr. Fauci will still have the advice of the other half a dozen attorneys that he brought along today. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So now we get into the parade, the circus, and the promotions. And Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire did the same thing, completely overlooking the federalist system that they swore an oath to uphold. There's nothing in the Constitution that grants the federal government the power to fight diseases. The only excuse they could come up with would be to do it for the military in some sort of capacity to fight a viral agent that could be created by a so-called enemy nation state, which is why, in fact, Sasha Larapova discovered that the COVID-19 mRNA jabs were developed under the DOD. That's why they did it that way. But when we look at NIAID, NIH, CDC, and all the others that are supposedly somehow there for your protection, not only ethically is that completely bogus, because you'll find out just how protected you are if you'd rather do something else with your money on your own calculation, but it's for everybody's betterment. And if you don't like it, well, then you're the danger. Just like we saw when they argued that you better wear your mask for somebody else. You better get injected for somebody else when the masks didn't work. And the whole idea of supposed injection was for one's own protection. And of course, they wouldn't work anyway. And we found, of course, that just like the people at the Great Barrington Declaration declared, the traditional way of handling viral outbreaks would be to see that older people stay inside, weaker people stay inside, and stronger people acquire a virus, get natural immunity, and then the population actually reaches endemic status. But let's go to this guy and hear what he has to say during a question period when Anthony Fauci is supposed to be questioned. No, instead we get a sales pitch for greater government, more Sovietism.
The COVID-19 pandemic is not the first or the last public health crisis to impact our nation. In December 2022.
Again, they define what is public health, and they define what is public health crisis. There was no public health crisis because there's no such thing as public health. There's only individual health. And when they aggregated it, there was no way that they could tell whether or not this so-called COVID-19 pandemic was a pandemic at all, because they literally were funding medical centers to claim that people who came up positive with a ramped up PCR test who might have died from COVID-19. And they gave them $30,000 extra. So that incentivizes an inflation rate beyond what even would have been considered normal.
I released a report that identified significant failures in our federal government's preparedness and initial response to COVID-19. This report contained 17 key findings. It's a very large report, which I have right here. It contains 17 key findings and corresponding recommendations, including the need to invest in sustainable domestic manufacturing capabilities for critical medical supplies.
Is that constitutional? No. Literally, anybody who studies Soviet history, I remember the first book I read was called The Russians by, I think it was Hedrick Smith or something like that, Hedrick something or other, when I was in high school. This is exactly what they would do. Exactly the same thing. They screw up, so they need more money. The system never works. The cars don't work. They're calling for certain crops that aren't grown in certain areas. They're trying to get fish from a particular lake that doesn't even carry those fish. And then, as I mentioned a few months ago, the man who reported that to the Soviets, his last name was Tchaikovsky back in the Soviet era. They imprisoned him because he said, well, we don't have these types of fish in this lake. You're demanding these types of fish, like some sort of pike or something like that. We don't have them here. They put him in jail. This is the same mindset.
Build the infrastructure needed to surge testing capacity for infectious diseases and robustly fund public health emergency preparedness and responses across all levels of government. Unfortunately, multiple administrations, including the current Trump administration, have failed to fund or to reform our health preparedness. This is something that I would hope the committee in the future would investigate. It needs to be taken a look at.
Okay.
It also feels like...
So let me just ask you, has the budget for the CDC ever gone down? No. Has the federal budget decreased under Trump or increased under Trump? What did the CARES Act do? What did Biden do after the CARES Act? This is just so empty. This is the smoke from a distant fire, except, of course, that song is about romance.
New public health threat is hitting us every month. There's a foodborne parasite affecting thousands of people in Michigan and across the country, and our federal agencies still haven't fully pinned down the source of that outbreak. Measles cases in this country are at the highest they've been in 35 years.
Is that fatal? Is that destructive? Everything is another brickbat. It's all a new set of boogeymen.
More children are getting sick and even hospitalized from this preventable disease. Over 1,000 people have died from the Ebola virus in Africa, and we don't know how widespread this crisis actually is.
So you know what the United States is doing, of course. That's right. They went to, was it Nigeria? And they decided they would open up a medical center for a place where they had never had Ebola, and they're going to be taking Americans who possibly could be showing signs of Ebola and shipping them there because, there's nothing like U.S. imperialism. That's just awesome, huh?
We have a hantavirus scare on a cruise ship.
It's all scaremongering. It's incredible. It's incredible. And again, even if some of these things might be alarming to some people, they might not be alarming to you. So even if measles is alarming to somebody else, they have no right to tell you it should be alarming to you because you have other priorities. Maybe it's like the Brady Bunch and somebody's got the measles and they're going to stay inside, like that episode when they stayed inside and people got the measles, or they'll have people come over and get the chicken pox or whatever it is, right? They are deciding for you. This is pure Rousseauian collectivism. Whatever is decided in the magic assembly house is unquestionable. That's what Rousseau said. And so when you see these people, they know better for you. And if you question it, you're the dangerous one. Just like the mindset that you and I felt when we were trying to speak the truth about COVID, it brings it all back, doesn't it? It brings it all back. Yes, indeed. Many hours. And those were the times when NewsGuard really started to come after me at MRC TV. Let's talk to a man who experienced his own shadow banning, his own set of brickbats thrown at him. Our guest coming up now is, of course, well known to this program and well known to many people from his website, and, of course, appearing on the David Knight Show, appearing with Knights of the Storm, and many other programs. It's time for the Liberty Conspiracy Mind Meld, everybody, and let's hear from Eric Peters of Eric Peters Auto. All right, I like it. Good stuff from Spock and McCoy. Excellent stuff. And let's bring on our fellow mind melder, Eric Peters. Eric, good to see you. And we're right on time. This is great. I didn't have to keep you waiting. I know you've got a lot going on. And of course, as we all know, it's very important that you go out there with your fellow lockdowners and shut down some businesses, because it's sort of like an anniversary. Every once in a while, I think some random business should just get shut down. Maybe a gym in New Jersey, or maybe some pellet balls should be shot at somebody's porch in Michigan or something. How about that, huh?
Yeah, well, the trauma hasn't abated. And by the way, one.
Yes. I'm glad I got to see
people watching. That's from the Space Hippie episode of the original series.
The Space Hippie. You remember the one, The Children Shall Lead, where they called Kirk a grup?
Yes.
And he gets all emotional, goes, yes, I'm a grup. You'll all be grups. Oh, man, it was so great. Blah, blah, blah. No, blah, blah, blah. You would get all upset. It was great.
You know, it's good to start the show off with a laugh, because I had a frown on my face a little while ago. Yeah. I was listening to you talk about these Fauci hearings, and it's infuriating because it's just a dog and pony show. Nothing is going to happen to this man. Everybody understands this man is a criminal. Do we need to have a hearing to determine that he's a criminal? This dog torturing SOB, the litany of crimes this man has committed. And once again, there will be zero consequences. There are never any consequences, are there, for any of these people, ever?
I was feeling the same thing, Eric. I thought, nothing's going to be coming of this. But then I saw, and I actually thought Jim Jordan was a little bit unprepared. He didn't have some of the paperwork that he needed to have and things like that. But I thought maybe there will be a slightly silver lining to this if it can. And, the lines of demarcation between people, whether it's on social media and the people who unfriended you because you wouldn't wear your mask, all this nonsense, or whatever it might be, whether they thought you were a Trumper just because you wanted to actually uphold the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments, and you didn't want lockdowns without due process and stuff like that. Somehow that made you a Trumper, even though Trump is doing that to people all the time now with his immigration police state. But the thing that really gets me is I thought today maybe just a few people, when they hear about this stark differential between what Fauci was actually doing and what he was claiming. And what's really interesting is inside his diary, you can tell that he was phrasing things in a way so that his diary itself was going to be set forward for public consumption. So at times you can sort of see he was setting things up to for public consumption. But I thought, if they can hear about the VAERS listing, if they can hear about things like ivermectin, if that reminds people, maybe there'll be something good that comes out of this at least.
I don't see it happening. I regard this whole thing as an obscenity. This man hasn't even got the grace to apologize, to say, I meant well. Not that he did. We all know that he didn't. No. And to just acknowledge the incalculable harm that has been done to this country, to the people of this country, in the name of stopping the spread. I mean, my God, the litany. Think about the kids who had to deal with this, pre-verbal kids. Think about all of the people. I was one of them who had an elderly relative that was in a care facility that could not access that person because of the guidelines, and missed that irrecoverable time that you will never get back. I mentioned in an article that I just posted on the site, and I've talked about this before, a friend of mine in my county ran a business. He had a cafe. It was a popular venue locally. Great guy. And, he had a number of people that worked for him. He lost his business over this, like so many independent small businessmen did. because he had a little restaurant. And how do you keep a little restaurant going for months when it's locked down? And then when they allow you to open it again, you can only have 50% capacity. And you can't have people sitting at the bar, you know, where actually restaurants make the bulk of their money at the bar.
Yeah.
You can't do that. He did everything he could to try to preserve his business. It went under. Nothing happens. He loses his business, but nothing happens to Dr. Fauci or Trump or any of them.
No. And one of the things that bothers me too is the shakedown of taxpayers to put in even more money for the CARES Act, and how, unfortunately, you know, this is just the nature of it. There are so many people who their hearts are in the right place, I think. And I don't want to sound condescending or anything like that, but so many people come out of this seeing the way that bigger corporations were favored. You know, the rent seeking happened. They could afford things like deliveries. They could afford things like, oh, Walmart will be left open, but the small companies won't be. You know, the small restaurateur, as you said, won't be allowed to continue. But you know, some fast food place will be able to continue, or they'll be subsidized because they'll be able to pretend that some of their sub corporations are small companies and they'll get the CARES Act money. So I think sentimentally, many of the people on the ground saw that these things were happening to maybe some of the local businesses, local shops in their area, and they saw this as capitalism. This is, again, the bigs helping the bigs. Sure. When that's mercantilism. It's not really capitalism. And I think we're seeing the same sort of thing now manifest itself as people see big media with CBS and so on being tied into the Zionist project, or the big arms manufacturers and big pharma. So there's this unfortunate, and you know, some people could argue, well, Gard, even if you had an anarcho-capitalist, you know, voluntarist state, voluntarist situation, it would grow and grow and grow into this corporatist thing where the biggest would survive. There's an argument against that, but I won't go into it now. But I think it's very difficult to get people who see the way that this has happened to recognize you're not going to get it any better if you think you're going to get government to somehow balance that out, because the government is already the one that caused the problem. You're not going to vote in the right Bernie Sanders all the time, because Bernie Sanders already got Lockheed Martin to move into Vermont.
Remember the Outlaw Josie Wales? I'm sure you remember the Outlaw Josie Wales.
I've actually never seen it.
Oh, you've got to see it. It's one of the best Clint Eastwood movies ever.
Yeah.
At any rate, there is a scene where a principal character named Fletcher, who was involved in betraying Josie's character and some of the men. It was set in the Civil War. It turns to the senator who arranged for this betrayal and says, don't pee down my back and tell me it's raining.
Right.
You know, that is the situation that we've got. This stuff is incandescently malicious that was done to us. You know, this idea that the virus doesn't spread in Walmart, it was designed specifically to destroy small businesses, to consolidate wealth. Yeah. That's what it was all about. There's another aspect of this that I think is worth revisiting that goes back half a century, goes back to the 60s and the so-called civil rights era, when the right of free association was eviscerated.
Right on. 1964 Civil Rights Act, Public Accommodations section.
Yep. Nobody during the so-called pandemic was forced to go into any store, any business. You know, that's the problem, in my opinion.
Yes.
You know, everybody was forced to lock down. Well,
right.
What's that all about? I mean, if a person wants to freely associate, he hasn't got a bayonet in his back. If he wants to enter that restaurant that my friend owned, that's his business.
Exactly.
You know, if somebody else is afraid of catching a cold, they don't have to go in. There's no force involved. It's free association. You know, and we as Americans, because it's been 50 years now, have been conditioned to this, habituated to this idea that you as an individual cannot choose with whom you wish to interact. It's perverse. It's bizarre that this was framed as a civil rights issue when it is the gutting of the very idea of civil rights.
Exactly. The right to oneself and one's labor and how one applies his labor to acquire property, they are all supposed to be hands off. And so, just like you said, the 1964 Civil Rights Act public accommodations portion, and again, I'll go back to the Marsh v. Alabama decision in 1945 when they said, which is what established the opening legislatively for the 64 legislation, they said that public private property that was open to the so-called public was public property. And that's what led to the 64 legislation. And it's not, it's private property. And as I mentioned it, we see the tragedy of the commons all the time. And I was writing about this every week. I would write 2 or 3 articles talking about how this is a manifestation, this public so-called health thing is a manifestation of the tragedy of the commons. So if you have private property, as you say, I can determine, do I want to go into that place or do I not want to go into that place? And the person can say, do I want someone to wear a mask or do I not want someone to wear a mask when they come in? It's a two-way street. And if that person wants somebody to wear masks and I don't want to go in, that's fine. I don't have to go in. He doesn't. I shouldn't be forced to go into his place and wear a mask, just like he shouldn't be forced to accept somebody who's not wearing a mask. The same thing with somebody who wants people to be able to come in and not wear masks. He shouldn't be forced to have people come in and wear masks. The more private property there is, the more we can see variation and the ability allowing us to decide where we want to go. And that allows the market to show where people want to go. It allows for all sorts of different choices. But instead, you got the top-down, one-size-fits-all Sovietization of this whole thing, and then everybody fights. What's the final decision going to be? How much is going to be spent?
It's unreasonable and it's inhumane.
Yeah.
To take agency away from people. To deny them the adult human right to make decisions for themselves about their personal affairs. Again, if I want to walk into a store and assume whatever supposed risk there is, nobody's making me do it. And if there are consequences, well, that's on me. But I will make the choice, not somebody else. And so we were put into this just enraging position of, again, the government corporate model of one size fits all, even, giving it the most gentle reading that perhaps if you caught this particularly bad strain of flu, COVID, whatever the heck it was,
right?
If you're 80 years old, obese and diabetic and arteriosclerotic, that might kill you.
Right.
Well, I'm not 80 years old, arteriosclerotic and diabetic. So, right. and certainly some healthy 17-year-old kid isn't either. Right.
Absolutely.
So why in the heck is everybody forced to basically abide by a standard premised on this one category of person, and somehow to raise this point makes me, I'm a granny killer. I want to kill. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm saying that risk is a continuum. And again, as individuals, we can make decisions to mitigate the risks that we consider for one reason or another to be excessive. So if I were an 80-year-old obese diabetic, maybe I would stay home. Maybe I would avoid public places. That's entirely reasonable. But it's vicious and cruel for that person to say that fifth graders, that teenagers, that young, healthy people also have to abide by what he considers to be necessary precautionary measures because of his particular situation.
Absolutely. And, and there's so many different dimensions on this, everyone. Eric Peters is our guest. Eric, there are so many different dimensions of this, whether it's errant claims scientifically about things like the weave, that we knew they were deceiving people, or the idea that the mRNA jabs are somehow proven safe when we knew they hadn't been tested all the way, or the suggestion that somehow kids are going to be in danger when we knew that the mortality rate for children was essentially zero, right. To the idea that pregnant women should get a transfection jab that can infect their children and get into their cells. All this stuff was manifestly knowable. It was very, very easy to know it. Like I said, anybody who had a familiarity with just basic molecular science could understand this stuff.
Well, here's where it gets egregious, though. Fauci is a medical doctor. Now, granted, he never practiced as a general practitioner, but nonetheless, he went to medical school. My father was a doctor. My grandfather was a doctor. I know a little bit about this stuff. He knew perfectly well that wearing a surgical mask served no medical benefit in terms of dealing with the transmission of respiratory viruses. So he did it maliciously. He lied to people. Just in the same way that people were lied to about these drugs that were pushed on them. They were told it's a vaccine. They were told that if they accepted these drugs into their bodies, that they could not get and could not spread the affliction. So a lot of them took it. Many were pressured, but a lot of them took it because they thought, okay, I won't get it. I'll be safe. They were lied to.
Yeah.
No consequences for that. I mean, it's an egregious lie, a consequential lie. How many people were injured by those jabs? How many people lost their jobs because they didn't want to take the jab?
Yeah.
No consequences. Nothing.
Yeah. And there are volumes. There are absolutely, I mean, people have written volumes about all the different facets to this. One of the first ones, as you mentioned, was the very clear lie, Anthony Fauci, in which he got caught when they first uncovered some of his emails in 2020, when he was saying publicly that the masks would work. And then he was exposed for actually internally saying, oh, the masks wouldn't do anything. And then he said, oh, yes, I had to lie in order to protect the people who were working so they would have enough masks. So in other words, he's saying, I really do think that they're actually efficacious, but I lied publicly to say that they're efficacious, but I really thought it was just utterly confusing and it made no sense. It's like, dude, you're lying. You're getting caught lying. They're not efficacious. And that was the first time that NewsGuard came after me on that virus stuff. I wrote an article about all these actors and actresses like Tom Hanks and so on who were talking to us about how important it was to wear the mask. And I was like, anybody knows anything about the size, you know, the tiny micron size of the viral particles, as they're told, knows that they'll get through the weave. And the other thing that gets me is
an actor. Where did Tom Hanks go to medical school?
Yeah, exactly.
Tom Hanks and these other people who are kind of towing the party line, I cut them some slack because they didn't know any better. You know, maybe they were acting on the information that they considered to be the best information. Fauci's not like that. You know, this is a guy who, again, went to medical school.
Yeah.
He's a scientist, a trained professional in a relevant discipline. He knew it was bogus. Heck, we saw pictures of him unmasked showing, you know, that he himself personally on that level knew the stupid mask is nothing more than political theater and despicable theater because it was used to terrify people.
Yeah.
It was used to create the impression of terror. It was used to impose social control. It was used to set people against one another. Dude, lest we forget the scenes that played out all around this country where people were even tackled by cops for not wearing a stupid mask out in public.
So it was incredible. And just the absurdity, the Terry Gilliam-esque absurdity of, as I mentioned, those New Jersey gym owners who were trying, and there was a Massachusetts gym, similar situation. They literally were shutting the water off for the place. They tried to shut the electricity off, so the guys brought in generators. Then they tried to shut the water off for the places. Yep. They tried to lock the doors. You know, I want to bring it back to that, Eric, because one of the things I think is important is for those people who maybe coming out of the Independence Day holiday or thinking about the Constitution and, you know, what is in the Bill of Rights or what are the enumerated powers written according to their standards. According to the Constitution, there's supposed to be the Third Amendment prohibits quartering of soldiers in homes because, of course, they experienced that during the colonial days and they didn't like it. But these regulations and the mandates on businesses are essentially a quartering of soldiers in a home. You will operate this way in your private property, and the presence of those soldiers is always hanging over you. So you will do it our way. You will put the furniture over here. You will only allow certain space. You will have this protection for your employees. You'll have an OSHA sticker up here that says you've complied for the safety of your employees based on what the soldiers who are invisibly there are telling you will do. And I think sentimentally that should be extremely important to people to think that the sense of private property has been breached to such monumental levels that they can literally tell people you've got to put tables outside your restaurant where you invested in your own friggin' restaurant to tell you how to run your business is just so offensive to everything that they went through in the revolution as to be completely contrary to the American tradition.
Yeah, that's excellently said. You know, you're right. You're exactly right. And I guess because it's just not as visible as having a red coat standing you know, inside your place. But again, people have been habituated to this. It's been what? It's been 60 years since the Civil Rights Act. 60 years. That's what, 3 generations of Americans, roughly speaking.
Yeah. So, and then we had Bush add to it with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
They're putting you would have to be well into your 70s or 80s right now today to be able to remember the America that existed before, where the owner of property had the right to determine whether he's going to allow somebody in or whether he wanted to rent or do business with somebody.
Right.
You know, this very facile and kind of superficially emotionally appealing argument that they used. You know, oh, it's mean to not rent an apartment to somebody because they're black, let's say. And yeah, it's kind of a despicable thing to do. But, you know, that was used as the cudgel to destroy the concept of free association and set us all against one another. Instead of dissipating it, imagine a scenario in which, okay, I'm going to be a jerk and I own an apartment building and I'm not going to rent to people who happen to be black or whatever, because I'm just, I'm that way. I'm just kind of a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then there's an apartment building right next door where the other guy who owns that building sees an opportunity. Hey, that dude is just he's not going to accept money from these people.
Oh, and it's amazing because some people will think, and this is where the punk rock thing really shows itself. It was totally DIY. The big record companies weren't interested. So we didn't need government to say, well, big record companies, you should bring in X% of this punk rock band and this post-punk band and this new wave band. No, people made their own records. They used fanzines. They traded mixtapes with each other. And it's the same sort of thing. Even if there wasn't an apartment complex that was catering at that moment, people would see that there's an opportunity and there's an interest because people aren't being served, just like Walter Williams would say.
Absolutely.
And people would acquire the property to do it. It's really amazing. Eric, can I ask you, I'd like to play for you more segments from this hearing. Sure. But before I do that, if I can, I want to go over to the news notes and I want to discuss also your piece about entertainment. I want to discuss what Rand Paul had to say at the end about the contempt vote. So I'm going to bring your volume down real quick just in case we might get an echo. And we're going to go over to the news notes here. So this is Mario Nawfal's team posted this, and this is Rand discussing what his plans are that he hopes to do. As he says, I think the courts will have to figure out whether or not, if you have a complete pardon, whether you have a liability against discrimination. Fauci pretty much just pleaded the fifth while under subpoena today. So this is a very interesting question. I don't think I agree with you, but I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but Rand is, I think, going to try.
That's the vote that will happen in committee next week. It will be in contempt of Congress. We believe that with his liability, his immunity from criminal liability, that he didn't need to hide behind the Fifth Amendment, and that maybe the Fifth Amendment doesn't attach when you have a pardon in place. That'll be a legal question, but the question on contempt.
So what Rand is doing here, Eric, is kind of interesting, and I don't think it's going to work for him. But he's saying since he was pardoned, he has legal immunity. So therefore, when he's asked questions now, if he doesn't answer the questions now, he can be found obstructing because he's not giving any answers.
Yeah, I've heard this argument now for quite some time that supposedly because Biden gave him a blanket pardon, since he's immune from legal repercussions from the things that he did, that now they can compel him to answer questions. Well, he's just going to say F you.
Yeah.
Right.
And they won't do anything. You're absolutely right. They won't do anything. Let me hop over here and bring up some of this because you got to hear some of the Senate testimony. I want to go to Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire. And she's a former governor. And I'll show you, this is Anthony Fauci, just so we get the wonders of Anthony Fauci proclaiming his Fifth Amendment, so-called right protected by the Fifth Amendment. But here we go. And we're going to show you a little bit of Maggie Hassan as she comes on to promote the magic powers of the state and how wonderful Anthony Fauci has been.
Trying to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you. Dr. Fauci, I want to start by thanking you for more than 50 years of service to this country at the National Institutes of Health. And it is unfortunate that you have been put in the position that you are in today. And it must be enormously frustrating to know that this hearing is designed to entrap you. It must be very frustrating for your attorneys to hear the chair's mischaracterization of the legal issues and posture that impact your decisions at the witness table today. Meanwhile, I was going to ask you a series of questions about things that are relevant right now to the people of the United States about the state of public health in this country. Since President Trump took office in 2025, more than 4,500 cases of measles have been reported. That is more cases in the year and a half since Donald Trump has been president than were reported from 2000 to 2024 combined. Children are dying because there has been increased vaccine hesitancy, fueled by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and frankly, his entire administration. Thousands of people in the United States of America have been sickened by a foodborne parasite, and the outbreak is nowhere near under control.
So I'm going to pause it there, Eric Peters, our guest, and ask you your thoughts. I have many, but I want to put it forward to you as the co-pilot, the mind meld. It is all yours, fellow Vulcan. What do you have to say?
I don't have thoughts so much as emotions of wanting to smash something right now. You know, listening to that creature pontificate about public health is bringing back everything that we suffered, that I suffered through the 4 years of the so-called pandemic at the hands of people like that.
Yes. Yes. It's so overbearing and so officious and so egotistical and arrogant, full of hubris, as they describe things that literally, for the most basic of civic students, have nothing to do with their oath. And second, as far as human psychology and morals are concerned, the idea that they can tell you what takes priority in your life, that they've got a handle on all these things. And as you said, Eric, and I really want to stress what you had to say is just so spot on, the fear mongering, you are the evil person. If you oppose this, you're going to put your grandmother at risk. That's sort of stooping to that level. And it's just astounding. Maybe some people believed it, but you know these people don't believe it.
This termagant has the audacity to lecture us about what she calls vaccine hesitancy.
That's where I wanted to go. Exactly.
And it is now no longer a matter of opinion. It is no longer a debatable point that people were they were blatantly lied to. They literally even changed the understood meaning of the word. Vaccine, in both common and medical understanding, used to mean a compound that provides immunity to the person who is immunized, meaning you will not get whatever it was that you've been vaccinated against. They then changed that. All of a sudden, it meant a palliative, a symptom suppressor. You will not be having symptoms that are as bad or severe if you take this thing. After the fact, they told people that, and they knew before the fact.
And and they knew first. They never, as we saw over in the EU testimony, when the British woman from Pfizer got up there, and we saw that guy Robert Roos ask her, "Well, did you actually look into how efficacious this was at Pfizer before you told everybody it would be efficacious?" No. Then, of course, we found out that Ursula von der Leyen had been on the phone making special deals with Pfizer and Albert Bourla with buying billions of euros worth of that before they even knew that it was efficacious. So the whole corporatist scheme comes through. But that exactly is what I was thinking. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Eric, because this idea of, well, these people are the ones who are pushing this, and this is making people vaccine hesitant. Maybe the fact that the so-called vaccine wasn't a vaccine, you lied to us about that, maybe the lies that preceded it as you created it, maybe the fact that you took people's money for this stuff, then claimed it was efficacious when you couldn't do that. So that was a lie. And then you lied about its efficacy as you went along. And then you had to admit, as Rochelle Walensky slowly did, well, we're starting to see that this time it's not really working well. Maybe there's a reason, because people got harmed by it.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to show you something. Yeah, go ahead.
Are they delusional? I mean, are they literally that impaired? I mean, would you have used car hesitancy if you had purchased a vehicle from some guy and it turned out the car was, not only just a pile of crap, but that he had deliberately done things to the car, and lied about it. And now you're being gaslit because you have hesitancy about going back to the same guy for another car.
It's funny you should bring it up, Eric, because somebody very close to me was very, very ready to buy a house, essentially, like a townhouse. And this person pulled out of the deal because there were certain things about what needed to be done at the house and so on and so forth that really not worth that sort of money. And, there's a lot of emotion that goes through when you're almost committed to something. And especially something very large like that, you say, I don't want to disappoint this person. They had expectations. And they work on these things for the public so-called trust. They do these sorts of things. That's where Rousseau was so leverageable to try, so he leveraged that emotion of, you've got to do it for others, for other people. And I want to go back, and we've spoken about it before, in the TV series, The Prisoner.
Yeah.
They've got about midway through the series of the 17 episodes. At the end of one episode, The Chimes of Big Ben, they had one ending and they only broadcast it that once when it was live. And you can find it on the DVD. They call it the alternate ending of The Chimes of Big Ben. It had nothing to do with the story. It was just the end theme. At the end of it, it has a picture of the globe and it says pop and everything explodes. Then in the second to last episode, number 6 is going up against number 2, played by Leo McKern, who's sort of the chief executive of the choices made by number 1, who you don't see until the very last episode. And number 2 he's drugged number 6 to battle him in wits and get him to agree that the state is good and he must do what they say. He must conform and become compliant. And he says, pop, pop, pop. So that you're actually getting a reference to that little bit that they put into the midway of the series. And he says, protect other people, protect other people. And that's exactly the excuse of the state. If you don't conform, you're the one who's unwilling to protect other people. You're the danger now. You're the threat, right?
Yeah, they do this in many different iterations of the same thing. There's an excellent quote that was uttered by Hermann Goering at Nuremberg. I wish I could remember it verbatim, but it was something to the effect of, naturally, the common people don't want war, but it is easy to bring the people around. Tell them that it is patriotic and that that if they don't go along with it, they're putting the country at risk. I recommend to anybody who's listening to this who isn't familiar with that quote to look it up. I wish I had it at hand in front of me. I ought to. Was that the same day that Goering said, when you're criticizing science, essentially you're criticizing me because I am the science? Is that was that it? There you go. Exactly. Now, I mean, Goering, to his credit, was an honest man in the sense that he in a very cynical way laid out the process, exactly what it is. Yeah. Whereas these other people, they do this gaslighting thing, where they impugn your motives for asking a totally reasonable question. Or shying away from doing something that you have good reason to believe is sketchy. Oh, well, that must mean that you're a denier of science, that you're wanting to kill Granny. To this day, it makes me furious. It will make me furious for the rest of my life until, same with me. Yeah. Until this is atoned for. And atonement consists of acknowledging what they did and consequences for what they did. And until that happens, there will not be peace in this country. No. And I think at least also I would add that people learning the Federalist system, understanding what the Bill of Rights stands for, and understanding that you don't shut a business down. You have no right to do that. And Donald Trump started all that off by
March 13th, 2020, saying there was a so-called medical emergency. He had no constitutional or ethical power to do that. And then setting up the dominoes with the model state health emergency plans that was put forward in 2003, 2004, 2005 by Johns Hopkins and adopted by all these states. David's spoken about it. You know about it. I knew about it in 2005 when I was broadcasting. You know, I want to ask you this, Eric. I want to show you on this screen. This is a doctor. I recorded this woman and I said, why stream and comment with brickbats when one has no actual data or knowledge base on which to stand? So I'm going to bring that volume up, bring your volume down. This happened today while this woman, Dr. Angela Rasmussen, was on here commenting about how important the Rousseauian assembly idea was. And it just blew me away that she would embrace all of this nonsense. And actually, you'll hear her say, she mocks Jim Jordan when Jim Jordan mentions that this was a gene therapy injection. And she actually tries to call it a vaccine.
Bipartisan oversight that's going to help strengthen our public health and pandemic preparedness and other homeland priorities. That's what this committee needs to focus on. It hasn't the last year and a half. Let's hope it does.
But what happened in the last year and a half? That's right. The Republicans got the majority and Rand Paul became the chair.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Fauci, I hope the American people listen very carefully to Chairman Paul's opening statement.
Here we go. Ron Johnson,
I mean,
senator
it's a
from
stunning
Texas,
indictment
Wisconsin,
of
massive
the actions you've taken that
anti-vaxxer.
have been so destructive to global.
Now, I'm just going to mention this. She calls him a massive anti-vaxxer, and evidently she's never really heard his explanation on why he started to investigate these things. And I'm not a big fan of Ron Johnson on a bunch of other things. But his explanation on this is he started to see the effects of these jabs, the effects of the adjuvants that were added to just vaccinations themselves. And this is not even a vaccination.
No,
it's incredible.
An interesting aspect of this to me, this woman's a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And she might ponder why it is that the medical profession is now held in great contempt and with great suspicion. I mean, imagine if you had, a contractor who built shoddy houses. And at that point, you might be a little bit leery of hiring this guy to build a house for you. You know, the presumption of competence, of goodwill has been vitiated by all of this.
So
you have to be out of your mind to not be skeptical of what a doctor tells you at this point. If I were a doctor, I would be so seething with resentment about what has been done to the reputation of my profession by these people.
Absolutely. And I just want to mention too, Eric, if anybody's new to the show and they think that maybe I'm giving Rand Paul too much of a pass, and I'm friends with Rand, I haven't spoken to them for many, many years, but if they think I'm giving him too much of a pass because he and his wife got stock in Gilead, the maker of remdesivir, they got about, I think it was like $1,500 worth of stock, but he did not give the disclosure within the required time period. I hope they'll refer to, I actually did a separate segment all about that because I was curious to find out more about it. And it wasn't, he didn't handle that right. And it's very easy for someone to say, he had a vested interest in that and he should not have been invested in it. So I just want to let people know that, I have been critical of Rand and I'd love to actually get some answers from him. I'll show you a little bit more here as we go through this, Eric, because there's one more segment I want to show you of this woman who's just insufferable. And it's not just her attitude. It's how completely lacking in any facts she actually is. And she's just there to basically say, well, they're the Republicans and they're the bad guys. It's just total party politics and gamesmanship.
I certainly understand why you needed a pardon.
Right, because we were planning to go after you like this.
Counsel, you're not answering any questions because I think it'd be almost impossible for you to answer the questions truthfully.
Oh, no. Well, he actually explained why he's not going to answer any
really
questions because you're trying to railroad him.
What you did.
What did he do besides his job?
Self-incriminating.
It's pathetic. Ron Johnson held a committee meeting, an oversight
I've been
hearing
deluged
a couple months ago,
questions.
basically saying that COVID vaccines cause turbo cancer and myocarditis. And he had a whole lineup of anti-vaxxers.
Questions.
And he had a whole horde of data showing exactly that. And we knew early on that they were causing myocarditis and turbo cancers. And now we know the mechanism by which they do it.
Deserve answers, and now you're
Nothing
not going to
this man
provide those
says is
answers.
legitimate.
So with my limited time, I'm going to
Bloviate,
talk about things that my investigation revealed
his
that
investigation,
have not been adequately answered and quite honestly haven't been adequately covered.
mRNA vaccines cause turbo cancer. Spike is toxic.
I'll kind of combine
Spike
the questions into kind of one, but I certainly let's put up the last COVID chart.
If
I
were
was
Fauci,
warned
I'd just
pretty
be
early
like
on about
this
the dangers
entire
of the
hearing.
experimental gene therapy that you've called a vaccine, but it really
Experimental
falls under
gene
the definition
therapy.
of gene therapy.
No,
So,
it doesn't.
So she won't even admit, Eric, that something like that. And again, I just have maybe a slightly above medium level of knowledge of biology, right? Like I said, I worked in a place that was part of the Human Genome Project, although it didn't even have that name at that time. My sister got a degree in epidemiology. She used to teach biochem, and I used to look at the screens, the electrophoresis screens, as the protein gels would be. So I'm familiar enough with cellular biology to know about transfection and to know that mRNA causes transfection. I knew that before I even knew what this was doing, that it was going to do that. Yeah. And she's a medical doctor, and she won't admit the truth. It's just it's insufferable.
Why does she have a medical license? I mean, she's clearly incompetent. She doesn't acknowledge the fact that it's now known, it is established science that indeed those shots, I won't use the word vaccine, those shots did cause myocarditis. Fact. It's not a contentious opinion. It's not a debate point any longer. It's the truth. Sorry, she just won't acknowledge the fact, which totally, completely destroys her credibility as a doctor.
Yeah, and again, it sort of washes the waters of the ocean come back to me as the tide starts rising again from 2020, 2021, as you and I were writing about these things. And I would have to spend hours over the weekend, whether it was the climate change stuff, and I'd get stuff from NewsGuard, or it was about this stuff. And I'm sitting there, and I was like, all you have to do is just click the hyperlinks. I put them in the article, and they wouldn't do it because they wanted to screw us up. They wanted to cause us more hassles. And so what does that tell us? That tells us they had an agenda to try to slow down the people who actually were putting out real information that they could see themselves. They could see the truth. Yeah, and they just wanted to slow us down.
People weren't just being censored. They were being fired. Yeah. They were being demonetized, debanked. I mean, one hop, skip, and a jump away from being put into a camp, for daring to tell the truth about what everybody now knows was the truth. But
and you talk about camps. Look at what the governor of New York did with all those elderly people. He literally did put them into elderly home camps where they got sick. It was, and like you said, you experienced the human tragedy of not being able to be in contact. I'm going to go over, Eric. I want to talk about your latest piece about the Odyssey as well, because I think that's rather important to bring up culturally before we go. There's so many great stories over there. But Karen Carpenter is there. And by the way, her show last night, everybody, was phenomenal with Dr. LaGuardia. Just phenomenal. It was really terrific. MOE Studios is there. And let's see, we're going to go up a little bit just to check. Mark Young says, a doctor wearing earbuds that are radiating her brain, not too bright. Yeah, and I'm sure other people, let's see, Mark says, the COVID fraud is just one of many things in this country needs to repent for. Yeah, I was really hopeful that people would learn some lessons, and maybe again there might be a few people who learn these lessons. But final thoughts on this, Eric? I'll leave it to you, and then I really want to touch on your thoughts on the new film, The Odyssey.
Yeah, well, let's say right now, Trump could do a lot of good by making a public apology, by saying this was wrong, I meant well, I was caught up in it, and I erred. I should have ended the emergency. I should have calmed people down. I should have removed Fauci. I shouldn't have stood there like a spray tanned wooden Indian while Fauci, hystericized the entire country. There are so many things. This will not end because it hasn't ended. Every single time that I go out now and I go to a store, whether it's Lowe's, the supermarket, there's invariably at least one person that's still walking around with a stupid mask. And I have great sympathy for these people because they've been damaged. They have been so terrorized by all of this, and their doctor probably hasn't told them, "Hey, you shouldn't have done this. This serves no purpose." All you're doing is winding yourself up into a state of perpetual, ongoing, cortisol-infusing panic, worrying about, you're going to catch a cold and die. I mean, this is understood to have been a neuroses, before COVID. It was understood that people who had a hypochondria were in the grip of a condition, that they had a morbid fear of getting sick. This has been normalized now. And we're all expected to just sort of pretend. You come up to the checkout line today, and you'll see there's somebody wearing a mask at the checkout counter.
Well, that's not to say that there weren't nefarious funding mechanisms that started during the Obama administration that saw the EcoHealth Alliance get hundreds of thousands of dollars to then move the research they were doing at Chapel Hill over to Wuhan. They've got the money trail. They've got the emails from Fauci. All that stuff is manifest. Whether they produced something or they didn't produce something, it is not necessarily relevant to the fact that they were attempting to do something. And this whole argument about the wet market and all that other stuff, it doesn't really matter. Of course, we know that was false about the wet market anyway, but it doesn't really matter when it comes down to whether or not my neighbor should be free to not have other people decide for him. We're going to take your money and do with it what we want. Whatever the output is, it doesn't matter.
What would you think of a parent who told their kid that there was a tow monster or some dangerous entity that lived under the bed, and they better be careful? They better not let their leg fall out while they're sleeping because the thing might get them. And induced in them a state of just constant chronic anxiety and fear. And never sat the kid down and said, look, there really isn't a monster under the bed. It's okay. You don't have to worry about it. You can go to sleep. It's all right. That hasn't been done to this. The official government has not come out and said, and of course, Trump has no credibility now. So even if he did say it, it wouldn't matter. He's such a divisive, awful figure at this point. But if we had decent people in the government, I know that's asking a lot to ask, right? But if we had somebody who was at least not an awful human being, like Jimmy Carter, I'm not the greatest president, but I don't think he was a psychotic man. I don't think he was an evil man. Have a president who just says, look, this got out of hand. It's okay. You don't need to wear a mask anymore. It was overstated. It was overhyped. Let's try to get back to some semblance of normality. That needs to happen.
Well, let's talk about the cultural side of things. Over in the news notes, Eric, I was just so pleased to see you write about this, and it doesn't take away from the work of various actors or anything like that, or the fun of acting, to recognize that there's a problem with this so-called cultural identity politics infusion in everything that has to come out in the media. And that was part of what got people supporting Donald Trump. And people thought this was really frustrating. And I said, Eric Peters makes key points in this piece about the inversion of the so-called cultural identity mindset, whereby those who claim to be promoting various cultures will actually overlook works of art created by certain members of certain cultures. And they'll do it for the sake of so-called inclusion, actually working against their ostensible respect for cultures. I mean, it is a QED. So I'd like to turn to this, Eric. It's amazing. And you nailed exactly the problem of the multiculturalism mindset. The multiculturalism mindset actually is the government will force you to lose your culture, whatever the culture might be that they don't want to happen to be holding on. And they're going to make everything some sort of blend of whatever they think is important. And again, private property, all these types of things when it comes to businesses, those can't be included. And again, if somebody's going to be a racist scumbag, I'm not going to go and frequent his shop. It's and likewise, if I want to see a movie where I'm aware that they've got people of different races than the original story, maybe I'll go. But then again, that does seem to wipe away the original cultural source of that story. So talk to us about the Odyssey.
Yeah, it's ahistorical and counterfactual. Now, granted, Homer, the Odyssey by Homer is, of course, one of the great epic myths. In other words, Odysseus wasn't actually a real man. But the point is, it was a story that took place in the context of ancient Greece. And Helen of Troy was Greek. She wasn't black. And it's not racist to point that out. And, it's so to make this so clear what they're trying to do, the way that they're trying to subvert history, subvert facts, and to degrade people. Can you imagine? Let's say they were to remake Roots, and they would perhaps cast Ryan Gosling in the role of Kunta Kinte.
Right. That's a great way to look at it.
It's
right
wrong.
On.
And I would be as annoyed by that as I am annoyed by casting a black woman to play a Greek character. Granted, it's fiction. Now, I posit some other examples that are not fictional. There's a great TV series called The Last Kingdom,
yes.
which is based on a book. And it is about pre-1066 England, when the Anglo-Saxons were combating the Danes for mastery of England. So this is
Bernard Cornwell's book is great. It's
great.
A terrific book.
So this is it's loosely based on actual historical fact about that period. It's a historical piece, and they just have to introduce. There's this picture. They bring in a black man as a priest in 10th century England, not quite England. It's absurd because it didn't happen. It's a lie. It's of a piece with this foisting in our faces of biological men that we are expected to pretend have turned into women. It's an assault upon objective reality. Another example, there's a great series called Wolf Hall that's about the reign of Henry VIII. And there's a scene, and I have it in the where Henry is hectoring his lords who are seated around the table. There's a black lord at the table. Sorry, there were no black lords in Tudor England. And if that makes me a bigot and a racist, well, it's an honorable title.
Well, I think there's something to be said to delineate between the fun allowed people to act and pretend, whether it's Boris Karloff pretending he's a monster who's been put together as body parts, or it's somebody who is a white guy and wants to pretend he's Kunta Kinte. But there's also a little something that I think people have already used on the left-wing side, which is called cultural appropriation. And some people, regardless of how dumb that term might be to some people find some friction when they see that a story comes from a traditional culture, whether it's Chinese culture or Japanese culture or Indian culture or African or Viking, Norse mythology, whatever it is. And suddenly there's something that is put in there that immediately puts the boardroom and the thinkers behind the story in front of the camera, because that destroys the ability to suspend disbelief. And this is what they did with Doctor Who. The doctor was a grandfather in the first episode. He had a granddaughter. And then just last year, they made the doctor a woman. It's like, no. Now, the only way that they could do that was if they tweaked things and allowed for some sort of serum that the doctor could take to change into a woman, which they did just before the 50th anniversary.
Now,
however,
that's mildly annoying, but at least it is a complete work of fiction. There is no doctor, there's no TARDIS, but there actually was a 9th and 10th century England.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, Eric, look, I don't want to keep you, but this is just great. I hope people will go to your site. I'm going to put the hat on. I got the Ba hat ready because I knew you were going to be here. I got the Ba hat ready, and I will be looking forward to reading more from the website tomorrow morning. I don't know if I won't even ask. I'm just going to say you put out a lot of articles. More than one article a day. And I don't know how you do it, but I know you're up early in the morning as we were texting each other. You work hard, man. You really do. It's awesome.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on as always.
Oh, it's just fantastic. Okay, so we'll mention ericpetersautos.com. It's apostate 27832. And I think I am slightly shadow banned. I know that you are shadow banned for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So people go to ericpetersautos.com, get some great material there, get the articles, and share an article, couple a week, every couple days. And that'll be a good thing. Eric, thanks, man. We'll say hi to you from my cultural vicinity of Vulcan. Okay.
I wish I could do that. I can't do that.
Well, you just need to get those elastics they used to use for people's braces, and put it, there you go. You just do that. You're all set. Thanks, man. And I won't be saying this to the COVID idiots. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Eric. See you later, man. Eric Peters, everybody, ericpetersautos.com. Remember him because he knows, as Leonard Nimoy said on his album, what was it? Spock, The Touch of Leonard Nimoy. He did a song called Where It's At. And so, of course, we've got the Mind Meld. Live long and prosper.